The proposal. Julian Reed's penthouse was the epitome of modern luxury. Polished marble floors, walls lined with abstract art, and floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased the sprawling New York skyline. Everything about it spoke of wealth and power, but to Julian, it had become a gilded cage. Success had a way of isolating a man, and he was living proof. Standing by the window with a tumbler of scotch in hand, Julian's thoughts were clouded by the weight of an impending decision. His reflection stared back at him, a man in his late 30s with a chiseled jawline, silver streaks at his temples, and eyes that had seen countless deals won and empires built. Yet despite all his achievements, something gnawed at him. The gentle chime of his intercom interrupted his brooding. "Mr. Reed, your guests from Horizon Innovations have arrived," his assistant informed him. Julian set down his glass, adjusted his tailored navy suit, and strode toward the expansive conference room. Horizon Innovations was the key to his newest venture, clean energy solutions. If he secured their partnership, it would cement his company as a leader in the industry and secure his legacy. As he entered the room, the two representatives from Horizon stood to greet him. Mr. Clark, a seasoned executive with a no-nonsense demeanor, offered a firm handshake, while Ethan, a younger, energetic strategist, smiled politely. "Mr. Reed," Clark began, "thank you for meeting with us." "Pleasure's mine," Julian said smoothly, gesturing for them to sit. "I trust you've reviewed my proposal thoroughly." Clark nodded. "We have, and your technological advancements are impressive. Your team's innovation in renewable energy storage is exactly what we're looking for." Julian leaned back, confident. "Then I assume we're here to finalize the details." Clark exchanged a glance with Ethan, who cleared his throat nervously. "There's one issue, Mr. Reed," Ethan said carefully. "Your public image." Julian's brow furrowed. "My public image? What does that have to do with business?" Clark leaned forward, his tone measured. "These days, perception is everything. The government and the public want partners who are not just financially successful, but relatable, family-oriented, community-minded, someone they can trust." Julian's jaw tightened. He built his empire through sheer willpower and ruthless decision-making, not by pandering to public sentiment. "I wasn't aware my personal life was under review," he said coolly. "It's not about scrutiny," Ethan interjected. "It's about connection. People need to see the man behind the corporation, someone who understands community values, who has roots and relationships that go beyond boardrooms and profit margins." Julian's eyes hardened. He had long prided himself on keeping his private life separate from his professional endeavors. He had no family to parade around, no cozy holiday photos for glossy magazine covers. His life was sleek, efficient, and meticulously controlled. "I see," he said, masking his frustration. "And how do you suggest I address this concern?" Clark leaned back, his expression thoughtful. "Public appearances with a partner, perhaps. Charity events, community engagement, anything that shows you're more than just a business magnate." The words left a bitter taste in Julian's mouth. He despised pretense, but he also knew when to be pragmatic. Horizon's partnership was too valuable to lose. "I'll consider it," he said tightly. The meeting concluded, and the representatives left with polite nods. As the glass door closed behind them, Julian sank into his leather chair, his mind racing. The solution they suggested was simple enough on the surface, but it cut deeper than he wanted to admit. He had always believed that money and power could solve any problem. Now, for the first time, it seemed they weren't enough. That evening, Julian paced his penthouse, weighing his options. A fake relationship was a calculated risk, but if it was what he needed to secure the Horizon deal, he would find a way to make it work. His thoughts were interrupted by a memory, his mother's voice, sharp yet loving. "Success is hollow without connection, Julian," she had told him years ago. He had dismissed it then, too focused on climbing the corporate ladder. But now, her words echoed in his mind with unsettling clarity. Determined, Julian poured himself another scotch and pulled out his phone. If he was going to pull off this charade, he needed someone who could convincingly fit the role. She couldn't be someone from his usual social circles. Those women were too polished, too predictable. No, he needed someone real, authentic. But where did one even find authenticity in a city built on appearances? His fingers hovered over his contact list, but none of the names seemed right. Frustrated, he set down his phone and stared out at the city lights once more. Tomorrow, he would figure it out. What Julian didn't know was that fate had already set things in motion, and his life was about to take a turn he never expected. A chance encounter. The next morning, Julian Reed found himself restless. His usual routine, coffee brewed by his smart kitchen, morning news flickering on the sleek flat screen, followed by a driver whisking him away to his pristine office, felt suffocating. He had built a world where efficiency was king, but today he craved something different. His assistant had cleared his schedule for the day, a rarity in itself. "You said you needed time to figure things out," she had said with a raised brow. Even she, who knew Julian better than most, couldn't mask her surprise. Instead of heading to his office, Julian decided to walk. The polished streets of the Upper East Side gave way to the gritty charm of Harlem as he ventured further north. He hadn't walked these streets in years, not since his college days when ambition burned brighter than any sense of practicality. The neighborhood pulsed with life. Street vendors hawking fresh produce, children laughing as they chased each other down the sidewalk, and music spilling out from open windows. It was chaotic, vibrant, and completely unlike the sterile world Julian inhabited. His thoughts were interrupted by the scent of fresh bread and coffee. Following the aroma, he found himself standing in front of a small, unassuming bakery. The sign above the door read Nia's Hearth. The painted letters were slightly faded, but there was a warmth to the place that drew him in. A bell jingled as he pushed open the door. Inside, the bakery was cozy and inviting. Wooden tables were scattered throughout, and the walls were adorned with photographs of smiling patrons and handwritten notes of thanks. The air was thick with the scent of sugar and spice. Behind the counter stood a woman with radiant dark skin and braids wrapped neatly into a vibrant scarf. Her eyes sparkled with energy, and her smile was as warm as the oven behind her. "Good morning," she greeted cheerfully. "What can I get for you?" Julian hesitated. He was used to high-end cafes where the baristas barely made eye contact. "Just coffee. Black." The woman raised an eyebrow, her smile turning playful. "Just coffee? That's boring. No muffin. No pastry to go with it." Julian found himself smirking despite himself. "Surprise me, then." "Now that's more like it." She grabbed a cup, filling it with freshly brewed coffee, then placed a blueberry scone on a plate. "Trust me, this'll change your life." As Julian handed over his card, she waved it off. "Cash only. Old school around here." He frowned, realizing he hadn't carried cash in years. "I don't have." She cut him off with a laugh. "First one's on the house, Mr. Suit and Tie. But next time, bring cash." "Mr. Suit and Tie," he repeated, amused. "Well, you don't exactly blend in around here," she said, eyeing his tailored suit. "But hey, everyone's welcome at Nia's Hearth." "Nia," he said, glancing at her name tag. "This your place?" "Sure is. Built it from scratch with a lot of love and a little bit of elbow grease," she said proudly. "What about you? What brings a fancy guy like you to this part of town?" Julian hesitated, unsure how to explain his predicament without sounding absurd. "Just exploring," he said vaguely. "Good for you," Nia said, sliding the plate toward him. "Sometimes you gotta step out of your bubble, right?" Before he could respond, a group of kids burst through the door, laughing and jostling each other. "Nia," they shouted in unison. "Hey, my favorite troublemakers," she greeted, handing out cookies from a jar behind the counter. "Now behave, or no more treats. The kids grinned and promised to be good before settling at a table near the window. "You run a daycare too?" Julian asked, half joking. Nia laughed. "Not exactly. These kids are from the community center down the block. Their parents work long hours, so they hang out here sometimes. I like to think of it as my way of giving back." Julian was struck by the contrast between their worlds. His life revolved around power and profit. Hers seemed centered on connection and care. "You do all this on your own?" he asked, genuinely curious. "Yep. It's not always easy, but it's worth it." She leaned on the counter, her expression softening. "People think success is about money, but it's really about making a difference, you know." Julian's mind drifted back to the conversation with Horizon's representatives. Community-minded, relatable, trustworthy. Nia embodied everything they wanted him to be, but weren't those qualities genuine for her, not some manufactured facade? An idea began to form in his mind, wild and impulsive, but perhaps exactly what he needed. Later that evening, Julian sat at his penthouse dining table, the untouched scone from Nia's bakery resting on a fine china plate. The city lights sparkled below, but his thoughts were elsewhere. He had spent his life crafting an image of perfection, but now that image was a liability. What if he borrowed a bit of Nia's authenticity? She was magnetic, compassionate, and exactly the kind of person who could soften his cold, corporate persona. It was crazy, but Julian Reed didn't shy away from risk. The next morning, he returned to Nia's hearth. The bell jingled as he entered, and Nia looked up from the register, surprised but pleased. "Back so soon, Mr. Suit and Tie," she teased. "Julian," he corrected, offering a rare smile. "I have a proposition for you." Nia crossed her arms, intrigued. "Oh, this should be good. I need someone to pose as my fiancé for the next 3 months," he said bluntly. "And I think you're perfect for the role." Her jaw dropped, and for a moment, Julian thought she might throw him out, but then she burst into laughter. "You're serious?" she asked between giggles. "Dead serious. There's a significant business deal on the line, and your authenticity is exactly what I need." Nia shook her head, still laughing. "You're out of your mind, Julian." "Maybe," he admitted. "But hear me out. You help me, and in return, I'll make it worth your while, financially and otherwise. Whatever dreams you have for this place, I can help make them happen." Nia's laughter faded as she considered his words. The bakery was doing well, but there were always challenges. Expanding the kitchen, hiring more staff, and giving back even more to the community were dreams she had shelved due to financial constraints. Still, the idea of being a billionaire's pretend fiancé was absurd. "You really think this will work?" she asked skeptically. "I know it will," Julian said confidently. "You just have to trust me." Nia stared at him for a long moment before a slow smile spread across her face. "All right, Julian. But if I'm doing this, we're doing it my way." "And what does that mean?" he asked warily. "It means you're not just dragging me into your world. You're stepping into mine too. Community events, food drives, everything." Julian hesitated, but knew he couldn't afford to lose her. "Deal." As they shook hands, a strange energy filled the room. Neither of them knew it yet, but this arrangement was about to change both their lives in ways they never imagined. The terms of engagement. Nia tapped her fingers on the counter as she watched Julian Reed, Mr. Suit and Tie himself, standing in the middle of her humble bakery, looking like a fish out of water. His impeccably tailored suit and polished shoes were comically out of place among the mismatched wooden tables and rustic charm of Nia's hearth. "So," Nia began, narrowing her eyes at him, "you really expect me to pretend to be your fiancé for 3 months? Just like that?" Julian's expression remained composed. "Yes. The arrangement benefits us both. I get the public image boost I need, and you, well, let's just say your dreams for this place won't be limited by finances anymore." Nia crossed her arms, skeptical. "You think money solves everything, don't you? It solves most things, Julian replied without hesitation. Nia snorted. Yeah, well, I'm not some damsel in distress waiting for a rich guy to come and fix my life. I built this place from scratch. Blood, sweat, and tears. You can't buy my dignity, Julian. I'm not trying to buy your dignity, Julian said smoothly. I'm offering a partnership. And from what I can see, you're a woman who knows the value of a good deal. Nia's eyes narrowed further. He was slick. She had to give him that. But there was something about his offer that intrigued her. The bakery was doing well, but expansion was a dream she couldn't quite afford yet. Plus, helping more kids and families in the community was always on her mind. Still, the idea of pretending to be engaged to a billionaire was absurd. What exactly would this partnership look like? She asked cautiously. Julian's lips curved into a faint smile, sensing her interest. Simple. We'll attend social events together, make a few public appearances, and give the media exactly what they want. A picture-perfect power couple. And what happens when the 3 months are up? We part ways. Clean break. Nia leaned against the counter, thinking it over. And what do I get out of this? Whatever you need to grow this business. Financial backing, connections, marketing. You name it. Her brow furrowed. Why me, though? You could hire some fancy actress or socialite to do this. Why a random bakery owner from Harlem? Julian's gaze softened, just slightly. Because you're authentic. Real. That's what I need right now. Nia blinked, taken aback by his sincerity. For a moment, the polished veneer of the billionaire businessman cracked, revealing something more vulnerable beneath. She straightened, regaining her composure. All right, Julian. I'll do it. But on my terms. Julian arched a brow. And those are? First, no treating me like one of your employees. This is a partnership. Got it? Understood. Second, you're stepping into my world too. Community events, charity drives, everything. If we're doing this, you're not just dragging me into your world of champagne and caviar. Julian hesitated but nodded. Fair enough. And third, Nia added, her eyes gleaming with mischief, if you step out of line, I'm not above throwing a pie in your face. Julian chuckled, a rare sound that surprised even him. Noted. They shook hands, sealing the deal. The transformation begins. The next few days were a whirlwind. Julian's PR team swooped in, transforming Nia from a beloved local baker to the new face of his carefully crafted public image. Stylists fussed over her, trying to tame her natural curls and dress her in high-end designer outfits that made her feel like a mannequin. Nia tolerated it for about 5 minutes before putting her foot down. No offense, but I'm not about to turn into some Stepford fiancé, she declared, waving off a stylist holding a pair of sky-high heels. I wear what I'm comfortable in, or this deal's off. Julian, observing from the corner of the room, smirked. Let her choose, he instructed the team. Authenticity, remember. The stylists reluctantly complied, and Nia ended up in a sleek but comfortable dress paired with ankle boots. Her hair remained in its natural glory, much to her satisfaction. Their first public appearance was a charity gala at a swanky downtown hotel. The ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and elegantly dressed socialites. Julian, ever the polished businessman, guided Nia through the crowd with ease. You good? He asked under his breath as they approached the media line. Nia took a steadying breath. Yeah, just follow my lead. Suit and tie. To Julian's surprise, Nia was a natural. She charmed reporters with her warmth and genuine smile, effortlessly deflecting prying questions about their relationship with humor. How did you two meet? One reporter asked eagerly. Funny story, Nia said with a laugh. He walked into my bakery looking completely lost. I figured he needed a scone and a little direction in life. The reporters ate it up, their laughter echoing through the room. Julian watched in amazement as Nia captivated everyone around her. She was magnetic, drawing people in with her authenticity. As the night wore on, Julian realized something unsettling. He wasn't just impressed by her. He was intrigued. Nia was unlike anyone he had ever met, and that made her dangerous. Stepping into her world. True to Nia's terms, Julian found himself attending a community food drive the following weekend, dressed in jeans and a casual shirt, something he hadn't worn in years. He felt completely out of place. Nia, however, was in her element, directing volunteers and chatting with families as they packed boxes of food. "You gonna stand there looking pretty, or are you gonna help?" she teased, handing him a box. Julian smirked. "I'm not used to manual labor." "Well, there's a first time for everything." Suit and tie. Despite himself, Julian found the experience surprisingly fulfilling. The gratitude of the people they helped was palpable, and for the first time in years, he felt connected to something beyond profits and boardrooms. As they loaded the last box onto a truck, Nia wiped sweat from her brow and grinned at him. "Not bad for a billionaire." Julian chuckled. "Not bad for a baker either." Their eyes met, and for a moment, the world faded away. "Careful, Julian," Nia said playfully, breaking the tension. "You might actually start enjoying this." He smiled, but a part of him knew she was right. A world in collision. The morning air was crisp and cool as Julian pulled up to Nia's bakery in a sleek black SUV. Despite the countless luxury vehicles he owned, none of them had prepared him for parking in the cramped Harlem neighborhood. After narrowly avoiding a trash bin, he finally managed to squeeze into a spot along the curb. Nia, standing by the door of her bakery with a coffee in hand, couldn't hide her amusement. "Parallel parking not your strong suit." Suit and tie. Julian stepped out, straightening his casual blazer. "I usually have a valet for that." She shook her head, laughing. "Of course you do." As they walked into the bakery, Julian noticed how alive the place was even early in the morning. Customers chatted over coffee and pastries, and the smell of freshly baked bread filled the air. The warmth was palpable, something his sterile corporate world lacked. "You ever take a day off?" Julian asked, genuinely curious. Nia scoffed. "What's that? Small business owners don't get vacations." Suit and tie. "But I wouldn't trade it for anything." Julian admired her work ethic, though he couldn't imagine living without the luxuries his billions afforded him. "So, what's on the agenda today?" he asked as he leaned against the counter. "Community cleanup event," Nia said, tying an apron around her waist. "We're sprucing up the park down the block. You ready to get your hands dirty?" Julian arched a brow. "Is that a rhetorical question?" "Yup." Nia grinned. "You're coming whether you like it or not." Out of his comfort zone. The park was bustling with volunteers of all ages, armed with rakes, trash bags, and buckets of paint. Julian stood awkwardly next to Nia, who was already chatting animatedly with a group of elderly women. "Julian, this is Mrs. Thompson," Nia introduced. "She's been the heart of this community for decades." Mrs. Thompson, a sprightly woman with silver hair and a sharp gaze, looked Julian up and down. "So you're the fancy boyfriend, huh?" Julian hesitated, unsure how to respond. Something like that." Mrs. Thompson cackled. "Well, you better be good to our Nia. She's too good for just anyone, you hear?" Julian nodded solemnly. "I'll keep that in mind." As they moved to their assigned area, Nia handed Julian a pair of gloves and a trash bag. "Time to earn your keep." Suit and tie. Julian sighed but donned the gloves. "Manual labor again. This is becoming a pattern." "Don't worry," Nia teased. "It builds character." Despite his initial reluctance, Julian found himself getting into the rhythm of the work. There was something satisfying about seeing the park transform under their collective effort. "You're not half bad at this," Nia admitted as they painted a weathered bench together. "I'm full of surprises," Julian said with a smirk. "You sure are," Nia murmured, her gaze lingering on him for a moment longer than necessary. The dinner invitation. Later that evening, as they cleaned up the park, Mrs. Thompson approached them. You two are coming to Sunday dinner, right? Nia started to decline, but Mrs. Thompson waved a hand. No excuses. Be there at 6 p.m. sharp. And you, she pointed at Julian, bring dessert. Julian blinked. I don't cook. Mrs. Thompson laughed heartily. Figures. Just pick up something decent, fancy man. As she walked away, Nia grinned. Looks like you've been drafted into community life. Julian sighed dramatically. What have I gotten myself into? A night to remember. Sunday evening arrived faster than Julian anticipated. Nia had insisted on meeting him outside the modest brownstone where Mrs. Thompson lived. He stood on the stoop, holding a box of pastries from a high-end bakery downtown. Seriously, Nia teased, eyeing the gold-embossed box. You couldn't just grab something from a regular bakery. I didn't want to disappoint Mrs. Thompson, Julian said defensively. Nia rolled her eyes but smiled. Come on, city boy. Inside, the house was filled with the mouth-watering aroma of home-cooked food. The dining table was laden with dishes, fried chicken, collard greens, mac and cheese, and cornbread. Family photos lined the walls, and laughter echoed through the rooms. Mrs. Thompson greeted them warmly. There you are. Come on, sit down. As they took their seats, Julian was struck by the warmth and chaos of it all. His own family gatherings had always been stiff and formal, more business meetings than celebrations. Pass the greens, please, Nia said, nudging Julian. He complied, trying to navigate the unfamiliar dishes. So, Julian, Mrs. Thompson said, eyeing him from across the table. What's your story? Julian hesitated, unused to sharing personal details. I run a company downtown, mostly real estate and tech investments. Mrs. Thompson nodded thoughtfully. But who are you really? Julian opened his mouth but found himself at a loss. No one had ever asked him it before, not in a way that demanded a genuine answer. Nia, sensing his discomfort, jumped in. He's a work in progress, Mrs. Thompson, but I think there's hope for him yet. The table erupted in laughter, and Julian couldn't help but smile. A shift in perspective. As they walked back to Nia's bakery later that night, Julian was quiet. Penny for your thoughts? Nia asked. That was different, he admitted, in a good way. Mrs. Thompson has that effect on people, Nia said with a smile. Julian stopped, his gaze serious. Thank you for bringing me into your world, Nia. It's refreshing. She looked up at him, her expression softening. You're not so bad yourself, suit and tie. For a moment, the bustling city faded into the background, leaving only the two of them standing under the streetlights. Nia broke the silence with a playful nudge. Come on, don't get all sentimental on me now. Julian chuckled. Wouldn't dream of it. But as they walked side by side, Julian couldn't shake the feeling that something profound was shifting within him. Nia had a way of breaking down his walls, and for the first time in years, he didn't mind. The terms of engagement. Nia tapped her fingers on the counter as she watched Julian read. Mr. Suit and Tie himself, standing in the middle of her humble bakery, looking like a fish out of water. His impeccably tailored suit and polished shoes were comically out of place among the mismatched wooden tables and rustic charm of Nia's hearth. So, Nia began, narrowing her eyes at him. You really expect me to pretend to be your fiancé for 3 months? Just like that? Julian's expression remained composed. Yes. The arrangement benefits us both. I get the public image boost I need. And you, well, let's just say your dreams for this place won't be limited by finances anymore. Nia crossed her arms, skeptical. You think money solves everything, don't you? It solves most things, Julian replied without hesitation. Nia snorted. Yeah, well, I'm not some damsel in distress waiting for a rich guy to come and fix my life. I built this place from scratch. Blood, sweat, and tears. You can't buy my dignity, Julian. I'm not trying to buy your dignity, Julian said smoothly. I'm offering a partnership. And from what I can see, you're a woman who knows the value of a good deal." Nia's eyes narrowed further. He was slick. She had to give him that. But there was something about his offer that intrigued her. The bakery was doing well, but expansion was a dream she couldn't quite afford yet. Plus, helping more kids and families in the community was always on her mind. Still, the idea of pretending to be engaged to a billionaire was absurd. What exactly would this partnership look like? She asked cautiously. Julian's lips curved into a faint smile, sensing her interest. Simple. We'll attend social events together, make a few public appearances, and give the media exactly what they want. A picture-perfect power couple. And what happens when the 3 months are up? We part ways. Clean break. Nia leaned against the counter, thinking it over. And what do I get out of this? Whatever you need to grow this business, financial backing, connections, marketing, you name it. Her brow furrowed. Why me, though? You could hire some fancy actress or socialite to do this. Why a random bakery owner from Harlem? Julian's A's softened just slightly. Because you're authentic. Real. That's what I need right now. A future redefined. The storm that descended on Julian's corporate empire was unlike anything he had faced before. Losing the government contract sent shockwaves through his boardroom, rattling investors and shaking the confidence of even his most loyal executives. Nia watched him closely in those difficult days, sensing the weight of his world pressing down on him. She knew all too well what it felt like to stand at the edge of ruin. "You need a plan," she told him one evening as they sat in her bakery after closing. Julian leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. "I've tried everything. Nothing's sticking. The media's already spinning this as the downfall of Price Holdings." Nia placed a hand over his. "Then let them talk. You're not done yet, Julian. I've seen you fight for my bakery. Now it's time to fight for your company." Her unwavering belief in him ignited something within Julian. He wasn't just a businessman. He was a fighter. And he wasn't going down without a battle. Turning the tide. The following week, Julian assembled a crisis management team at his office. Gone was the stoic, detached CEO. In his place stood a man determined to reclaim his legacy. "We need innovation," Julian said to his team. "It's not enough to recover. We need to redefine who we are." As the team brainstormed ideas, Julian's thoughts drifted to Nia's bakery. Her ability to connect with people, to build something meaningful, was exactly what his company lacked. That night, over dinner at Mrs. Thompson's house, inspiration struck. "What if we pivot to community-driven projects?" Julian said, setting down his fork. Mrs. Thompson raised an eyebrow. "Big words, fancy man. But what does that mean?" Julian smiled. "It means putting people first. Affordable housing, local partnerships, investing in small businesses." Nia's eyes lit up. "You mean like what you're doing with my bakery?" "Exactly," Julian said. "If it works for Nia's hearth, it can work on a larger scale." Mrs. Thompson clapped her hands together. "Now that's a plan I can get behind." The revival of Price Holdings. Julian's new approach was met with skepticism at first, but as word spread about his community-driven initiatives, public perception began to shift. Investors who had once jumped ship returned, impressed by his bold vision. Nia became an integral part of the campaign, sharing her story and highlighting the importance of supporting local businesses. Her bakery flourished, becoming a symbol of resilience and innovation. "You're a natural," Julian told her after one successful event. "I learned from the best," Nia said with a grin. Their partnership, once purely transactional, had transformed into something far deeper. The proposal. One evening, as they walked hand in hand through the newly revitalized park, Julian's heart raced. The cool breeze rustled the leaves, and the city lights twinkled in the distance. "Nia," he began, his voice steady despite the nerves coursing through him. She looked up at him, curiosity in her eyes. "What's up, suit and tie?" He chuckled softly. I think it's time we dropped the fake from our engagement. Nia's breath caught. What are you saying? Julian took a deep breath, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a simple but elegant ring. I'm saying I love you, Nia. You've changed my life in ways I never imagined. And I can't picture my future without you. Will you marry me? For real this time. Tears welled in Nia's eyes as she stared at the man who had gone from a polished, aloof businessman to someone who had fought for her and with her. Yes, she whispered, her voice breaking. 1,000 times yes. Julian slipped the ring onto her finger, and they kissed under the stars, their worlds now fully intertwined. A new beginning. Their wedding was a beautiful blend of elegance and community warmth, held right in the heart of Harlem. Mrs. Thompson officiated the ceremony, declaring with a grin, I knew this fancy man was a keeper. Nia's bakery continued to thrive, expanding to new locations while staying true to its roots. Julian's company, now known for its community-driven projects, became a beacon of hope in the corporate world. But more than their professional successes, it was their love story that inspired those around them, a testament to the power of transformation, resilience, and the unexpected beauty of two worlds colliding. As they stood together at the grand opening of Nia's second bakery, Julian wrapped an arm around her waist. Think we did all right, suit and tie. Nia teased. Julian smiled, his gaze filled with pride and love. More than all right. And as the crowd cheered around them, they knew their journey was just beginning. Legacy and love. The morning sun bathed Harlem in golden light as Nia stood outside her newest bakery location, Nia's Hearth, uptown. The grand opening had drawn a crowd that stretched down the block. Bright balloons danced in the breeze, and the scent of freshly baked pastries filled the air. Julian stood beside her, impeccably dressed as always, but there was a warmth in his eyes that hadn't been there when they first met. He wasn't just a businessman anymore. He was a partner, a leader with heart, and the love of her life. You ready for this? He asked, his hand brushing against hers. Nia grinned, born ready, suit and tie. As they cut the ceremonial ribbon together, the crowd erupted into applause. Community leaders, loyal customers, and even a few curious tourists clapped and cheered. Mrs. Thompson, ever the proud matriarch, hollered from the front row, That's my girl right there. And my fancy son-in-law, too. Nia laughed, feeling a swell of gratitude. She'll never stop calling you that, you know. Julian chuckled. I've accepted my fate. Paying it forward. The success of Nia's Hearth, uptown, marked the beginning of something even greater. Nia and Julian launched a foundation aimed at supporting minority-owned small businesses. They provided grants, mentorship, and resources to help others achieve their dreams. Nia, now a sought-after speaker, shared her journey at events across the country. Her story of resilience and unexpected love became a beacon of hope for countless entrepreneurs. You're a rock star now, Julian teased one evening after one of her speaking engagements. Nia smirked. You better keep up, suit and tie. Their foundation not only revitalized local communities, but also changed the culture of Julian's company, now celebrated for its ethical and community-driven approach. A life well lived. Years passed, but the fire between Nia and Julian never dimmed. They built a life filled with love, laughter, and purpose. Their home, a beautiful brownstone in Harlem, became a gathering place for friends, family, and the occasional impromptu community meeting. On a sunny Saturday morning, Nia stood in the backyard, watching their daughter, Eva, chase bubbles across the lawn. Her laughter was infectious, and Julian, ever the doting father, played along, pretending to be caught by her imaginary traps. You're terrible at this game, Nia called out, laughing. Julian grinned. I'm doing my best. As Ava tackled him to the ground, Nia's heart swelled with joy. A surprise anniversary celebration. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Julian orchestrated a surprise celebration at the original Nia's Hearth location. The bakery had become a landmark, cherished by the community and visitors alike. Nia walked in, stunned by the sight of friends, family, and familiar faces from their journey together. Mrs. Thompson, still sprayed despite her years, greeted them with a mischievous grin. Still calling him suit and tie, Mrs. Thompson, Nia teased. "You know it, baby girl," Mrs. Thompson said with a wink. Julian raised a glass, his voice steady and heartfelt. "To Nia, the woman who taught me that life is about more than deals and contracts. You showed me the beauty of community, love, and resilience. Here's to many more years of building dreams together." Nia blinked back tears as the crowd cheered. "Speech," someone shouted. Nia laughed, raising her glass. "To all of you, our family, friends, and community, thank you for standing by us, and to my suit and tie, who turned out to be the best partner I could ever ask for. Here's to love, grit, and the unexpected beauty of life. A legacy of love." As the evening faded into night, Nia and Julian stood together, watching the flickering lights of the city that had witnessed their journey. "You think we did all right?" Nia asked softly. Julian wrapped his arm around her. "More than all right. We built a legacy." Nia smiled, resting her head against his shoulder. Together. And together, they continued to write a story filled with love, resilience, and an unbreakable bond that inspired everyone around them.